You're listening to the OCD Stories podcast, hosted by me, Stuart Ralph. The OCD Stories is a podcast dedicated to raising awareness and understanding around obsessive-compulsive symptoms. I do this through interviewing inspired therapists, psychologists, and people who have experienced OCD. Welcome to the OCD Stories. And welcome to episode 406 of the podcast. And in this one, I chat with Abi, who has kindly agreed to share her story with us. And in particular, we talk about sexual intrusive thoughts, compulsive prayer, scrupulosity, emetophobia, trichotillomania, an eating disorder, what's helped her, support from her partner, intimacy and intrusive thoughts, and much, much more. And thank you to NoCD for supporting the podcast. NoCD offers effective and convenient therapy available in the US and outside the US. To find out more about NoCD, their therapy plans, if they currently take your insurance, or to download their free app, head to go.treatmyocd.com/the OCD stories, or the link will be in the episode description. Thank you to all of our patrons for supporting our work. To sign up to our Patreon and to check out the other benefits you'll receive as a patron, please see the link in the show notes. So thank you to Abi for her time. I deeply appreciate it, and for her sharing her story. And of course, thank you as always to you guys for listening. It means a lot. Without further ado, here is Abi. Welcome to the podcast, Abi.
Hello. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, it's good to have you on. So as you know, I'd love to hear your OCD story, and you can share that now in as little or as much detail as you want to give.
Okay. So my OCD probably started when I was about 8 years old. I have a much better relationship with my parents now, but definitely growing up, my father was extremely strict, both physically, emotionally. And essentially, it was always just a push to get better grades to ensure that I wasn't going to go down the wrong path, which understandably I'm very grateful for now because I'm in a good position. But there was a lot of, there was a lot of violence and a lot of, it was just hard for me. I grew up in Cardiff, so I was alone as well. So it was just me and my parents. We're Sri Lankan. And there were no other Sri Lankans that we knew kind of in the late 1980s and 1990s when we lived there. And it was just really hard because I was just alone a lot of the time. And then my parents brought me up as Hindu. And then I was baptized to go to a Catholic primary school. And then I went to a Christian Sunday school. So there was a lot of, if you don't do this, God will punish you. If you don't do that, God will punish you. And up until probably about the age of 16, I would pray to my Hindu deity at home in my bedroom and then get into bed and roll over and pray to Jesus because I'd be so scared that something bad would happen. And then kind of university years were when it really peaked. I really didn't know that I had OCD. So kind of just prior to that in my GCSE years, what ended up happening was that I ended up having to wash my hands multiple times during prayer or to pray. So in my GCSE years, I probably ended up praying maybe 8 times a day. So when I got up after a shower, before I left to go to school, as soon as I came back, 6 o'clock when I started studying, 10 o'clock, and then before bed. So that's 7 times. And then when I went to university, I started getting sexually intrusive thoughts because I started having boyfriends. And then what happened was that I started, if I got a sexually intrusive thought whilst I prayed, then I would have to go to the bathroom, wash my hands to get rid of the thought, quote unquote. And then in 4th year of university, it got really bad where I was praying every time I left the house and came back, even if that was just to go to the shop to get a loaf of bread and come back. And then during each prayer, I was probably washing my hands up to 8 times. So I was going up and down the stairs. So that was, praying 14 times a day and washing my hands 8 times minimum during the prayer. Then really kind of what happens, because it wasn't just the intimacy, it was mainly if I saw things. So the kite runner, I don't know if you've seen the movie. There's a little scene in that where there's a scene in that where a young little boy gets raped. There is 13 Reasons Why. I don't know if you've seen that. It's on Netflix about a young girl who was raped, who then committed suicide. But in the second season, there's a pretty horrific bullying scene on a young man, and that for me tormented me for months. And then if I've read about real life, kind of there's this awful man that sometimes plagues my thought. He was one of the men that beat up and raped a girl on the bus in India, and the girl was a physiotherapist, I think, and she died. So the BBC interviewed one of the perpetrators, and I can just remember everything he wrote in the article, and it would just horrify me. I don't even know why I read it, but just the image of that man's face then and all the things that he's done. Every time I go to pray, I would have those pictures flashing in my head. So yeah, it's mainly sexually intrusive thoughts whilst I pray. I would say over the last 4 years, when I realized kind of what OCD, because even though I had CBT during university, I was too afraid to tell my counselors or therapists what the thoughts were. And so I didn't really own up or confess to anything, probably until my early 30s, when I started looking up, what are the nature of my OCD thoughts. And so finally I stumbled upon scrupulosity. So I realized it's scrupulosity, which is what I have in terms of always wanting to feel that I'm doing everything right and that, God isn't going to punish me. And then the sexually intrusive thoughts associated with that. And then looking back, I've had other OCD related things like emetophobia I've suffered from since I was a kid, had an eating disorder when I was about 14 to 16, again, which I think is very common just because of wanting to control. And then I also had, I think, is it trichotillomania, where I was pulling my hair out as well. So all of those that I've read about now, I'm like, oh, wow, like I definitely had those sort of things happening to me when I was younger. So yeah, that's kind of, I hope, a summary of how it's all been and what's been happening to me over the many years.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I guess I'm curious. So you said with your mum and dad, your relationship's a bit better now?
It's a lot better now because I found a wonderful counsellor about 10 years ago, and she just helped me create boundaries so that it wasn't such a I'm still a child and they're still the parent type relationship. And then also I've been able to, and they've actually finally seen kind of what's happening, because they didn't see anything I was doing. Even now when I talk to them, they're just like, we just thought you were being good and we praised you for praying because that's a good thing in our culture. And so they don't, like, my mum is very obsessive in terms of praying as well. I don't know whether she has OCD for definite, but for her, like my dad's, surprisingly, he says atheist, and yet my mum is very spiritual. So I did say to him, like, I wish you taught me about that when you were younger, because then I don't think I would have had such religious battles in my head. So yeah, it's much, much better now. So much so that I can actually talk to them about my OCD. And my dad is trying to, like, we go for walks when I go home, and, he's trying to understand why I feel so guilty, why I feel afraid. Yeah, he frequently says to me now, you don't have to pray if you don't want to, but I still find that really difficult not to do. But they've seen my mum about 2 years ago, she asked me to just walk in front of a temple to pray. And I just couldn't. I was just paralyzed. I would just get flashes of thoughts and images. And by the time I got home, I was trying to walk past this temple about 20 times. By the time I got home, I was in such a mess, and my dad just comforted me and he said, it's okay. Like, you don't have to pray. You don't have to pray. It's okay. So that's why it's a lot better with them now. And I'm actually able to tell them, I don't tell them like the full nature. They understand when I say sexually intrusive thoughts. And my dad is like, yeah, we've all had them. That's normal. But when you grow up and you're part of 3 different religious communities, and my parents are Hindu, Sri Lankan, we don't know anyone, or the temple doesn't have any English speaking priests, it's very difficult for me to find anyone or speak to anyone of my own age to see if they were going through the same thing or if their parents were teaching them the same thing. I don't know. So that's where I really struggled, I think, just being alone.
It makes a lot of sense. And then, especially as you say, you can't go to your religious leader because in this case you can't speak English. And I guess Okay. And then, you've mentioned there the sort of free religious communities you're a part of. Where are you at with that now in terms of how have you made peace with that or found your own path or yeah.
So I probably was it maybe 8 years ago now, I decided to start really reading GCSE religion textbooks just to find out what I identified with. And I realized that there were certain religions that I definitely didn't identify with. And even with Hinduism, I was like, I could understand it. But again, not that it wasn't for me, but I'm so used to having a single deity as part of Catholicism and Christianity. So I was able to step away, and even then I still find textbooks, they don't explain all of the different gods, or they don't explain the one different god and the nature. But Hinduism just seems very spiritual. And one energy rolls into another energy, which rolls into another energy. And so I have decided that I'm spiritual, and I believe that something or someone is definitely out there for me, because there've been times in my life when I've been in dire situations and I've prayed and just I've been saved from significant harm, I would say. And when I was in Australia, actually, I was speaking to a friend, and we just went walking one day, and I told her about the OCD at the beginning of the year, and then kind of towards the end of the year, we went for a walk. And even though she's got no mental health training, we started talking about thoughts and how she doesn't get affected by thoughts. She's Sri Lankan, as well. So we kind of had a similar, it was like nice to talk about how our parents were both strict, but she had brothers. So she was able to say my siblings and we were all able to help each other out and hang out with each other. So when we started talking about thoughts, she was able to say, yeah, I look at, pictures, because she has tattoos of gods on her arm. And so, whereas for me, I find that really difficult to like touch or to look at a picture of God. And then we were talking, and then all of a sudden I looked up at her and she was just saying things like, you can allow that negative thought to be there. You can just continue and do what you want to do. And it doesn't affect you. You can carry on. Like if she would say, yes, if I go to an art gallery and I see a picture that's, quite harmful, or there looks like there's a lot of aggression in it, I don't take that energy aboard, whereas I seem to take the energy on board. And then I just looked at her and I was just like, oh my God, you're my God. And it was just because we were just sitting somewhere really beautiful, and it was just the way the light was shining on her face, and it was just, she was speaking so much sense. And I've always, in the last 5 years, I've always been like, right, there's definitely a female feminine energy, spiritual, that I've wanted to follow. And then it was just that she was so peaceful and calm. I was telling her everything about all of the sexually intrusive thoughts and how it hurts me that I hear about sexual abuse in real life. It really pains me. I don't know why it's such a trigger for me. Maybe it's because of the OCD, but she was able to say, yes, that happens, but there are so many other good things that can happen. There are people who come out of it and make other people's lives better. It doesn't necessarily follow a cycle. So in terms of, who I pray to now, I pray to her, essentially. I've got a vision of her in my mind as my God. And it's been helpful a lot in the last year, because before I was just praying to like a blind star or the universe, and I didn't really have a picture. Even though I have a picture of God with me, I still always have that. It's more of a God that's a punishing God as opposed to a God that's a loving God. Yeah. So,
yeah, I like that. Yeah. Or maybe God was working through her.
Yeah, maybe. It's really helped.
Yeah, that's cool. Thank you for sharing that. I think it just helps maybe anyone else who is unsure or questioning or confused. And again, with what you were saying about your parents, I think the reason I asked that question, I'm glad you said it. You said with a therapist, you develop boundaries, and it's interesting to hear.
Yeah.
And transitioning from being that kid to being a co-adult almost, or an equal. Yes. Yeah. Okay, nice one. And then how does even now or historically did the OCD affect your work?
So fortunately, work has been in a way a godsend. So I'm a medic, I'm a urologist, and it's really interesting because surgery is the one place that keeps my brain quiet. because I have to focus, and I have to focus with all of my concentration, so much so that I never have any obsessive or intrusive thoughts at work. They're always at home when I'm praying, but they can be obsessive, intrusive thoughts of career progression, exams that are coming up. I think with work, probably the one thing that I'd noticed I was doing, especially in the last 5 years, where I realized that, again, something wasn't quite right, was ruminating a lot. Ruminating so much so that I would do a ward round. Before I even got to work, I would have done the ward round in my head about 50 times. So that's when I realized that is not good, and I need to speak to someone. And that's when I got in touch with Katie, who is a reverend who does OCD out in the States, and she is wonderful as well. So whenever I get a chance to have a session with her and join her groups, her support groups, because again, it's all about religious OCD, I can finally feel like I'm connecting with someone that's been there. So with regards to work, though, I actually find it's helpful because it keeps me distracted from my actual brain, because I'm focused on helping other people and making sure things get done for my patients. So, yeah.
That's really good. And so there you said you do surgery as well?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm ignorant with this, but do you have to do the whole hand cleaning routine a certain amount of times? Is that?
Yeah, just scrubbing. Yeah. But because I don't, it's only at home where I'm washing my hands to get rid of a thought, as opposed to washing my hands obsessively to be clean per se.
Yeah. It's more as just, in my head, I can imagine sometimes with OCD, it always wants to find like a new theme.
Oh, it
almost, what happens if I'm going to put my patients at risk? And almost then I could see how for some surgeons with OCD or anxiety, it could like lead on to. Really,
I mean, my OCD, even though it's mainly at home with regards to praying, it's outside of work when I'm by myself is probably when it's the worst. So, for example, up until the last 2 years, and even now, I sometimes find it difficult to walk down a road. I won't walk next to any bins, for example, because in my mind they're dirty, they'll contaminate me, and so I will make a path to walk around it. If I'm parking in the car and I put the handbrake up, if I have an image of sex or God or something like that, I'll have to put the handbrake back down and put it up again. Locking and unlocking a door because it's the motion of something going in and out. Again, if I have that, then I have to sometimes do that multiple times. Exercising at the gym. If I don't do a certain number of reps, something bad will happen. If I have an intrusive thought on my last rep, I have to keep doing it. So these are all things that I've really, really worked upon in the last 2-3 years. I've got an OCD diary that I complete every night that says these are the experiments that I did do well on today, and these are the ones that I haven't. And so those are the ones I try and focus on the following day. So it's very much a whack-a-mole situation, which a lot of people with OCD and definitely therapists always say that you break free with one. So even when I'm washing and praying now, I've probably got my prayers down to about 3 times a day now, which is amazing for me, I think. And then I'm not washing my hands at all. I will stand there and I will let the thoughts come in and out, and I might have to repeat a prayer, which I know is still neutralizing. However, to go from having to pray 14 times a day and wash my hands 8 times per prayer and get more and more anxious. However, that being said, like when I have something big coming up, like recently got married last week, which is great. Thanks. And the day of the engagement party, like I couldn't stop washing my hands to go up and downstairs to pray. And my auntie noticed, and she just put her arm around me and she said, come on, let's just pray together. She didn't know what was happening, but she could see I was getting more and more worked up. So she just put her arm around me and we just prayed together. And I had to like almost not leave on a bad thought, but know that I'd had a lot of bad thoughts there. And so I've got an exam coming up in November, and so when I was in Australia, my OCD got really bad because I was by myself. My partner was in the UK a lot. And I was by myself. It was very expensive. Couldn't afford to eat, couldn't afford to work out. And because I really wanted it to be a good year, an amazing year. My OCD just spiraled. So much so I was sitting my final exam, and I had to come back to the UK for it, and I didn't pass because I had a panic attack in the middle of the exam. So now that I'm resitting that in November, again, the peaks of panic that are associated with exam stress are when my OCD gets bad, and I might go back to washing my hands a couple of times during prayer, but I'm really trying to keep a hold on it as best as I can. So
that's good.
Yeah.
I like your methodical approach to, so when you say behavioral, did you say behavioral experiments? Or what was the word used about in the diary that you did?
Yeah, they're just my experiments. Like, so OCD experiments I achieved today, and then ones and I always put didn't quite achieve as opposed to did not achieve, because I think it's you've got to try and help yourself, haven't you? You shouldn't be so negative and harsh. I think a lot of
it's not binary or black and white, like pass fail. It's either like pass, and then there's like I don't know, what's the word? Steps to passing, like passed really easily, just passed, and there's obviously got close, started, as opposed to just pass fail. So this might be, for example, like today I will not pull up the handbrake when my thoughts tell me, that sort of thing. Cool, excellent.
It's mainly things like I'm going to continue walking down this road despite there being a bin. I'm going to continue walking through pillars or posts in the road. It'll be, if there's a section of 4, my brain for years has said, well, if you go through those 2, something bad will happen. If you go through these 2, something bad will happen. If you go through these 2, something good might happen. So now I've really focused on just walking. And actually, as I've gotten better, I feel lighter. So as I've been working through the experiments, I've just been a lot lighter, which I didn't expect from about 6 years ago, I would say. So
that's really good. Awesome. And your partner, how does the OCD come into that at all, or and how do they sort of help you, or do they understand the OCD? Just anything?
He has been unbelievably fantastic. He's very logical, and he doesn't have any real mental health issues. So when I first started, there've been relationships where I knew that if I told them, it would be very judgmental, very harsh, and used against me. Whereas with him, probably about 3 to 6 months in, I started telling him like the nature of my thought. He just seemed like someone I could trust, but also I realized I had to get better at talking about it, as opposed to running around in the bathroom, quickly washing my hands, going back quickly. Someone's going to notice eventually. But he has just been fantastic. Like when I first told him, he's just not judgmental at all about my thoughts. He's just like, it's just a thought, and it's not real. It's not who you are. And it's just bizarre. So just, he's never dismissive of it at all. And sometimes when he sees me go back and forth, he's like, Bebe, come on, last one. Or he'll interrupt and he'll just hold my hands while I'm there feeling quite anxious. And then he'll say, okay, come on, just reset one last time, and that's it. And that really helps. Or if he hears me from upstairs going back and forth to the bathroom, he's like, come on, Bebe, last time. So he's helped me massively. And I think that was also another incentive, that when I met him about 3 years ago, I also wanted the change of, I am not having this in 10 years. I'm not going to keep running back and forth to the bathroom to pray, washing my hands, like in my 40s. It's just not going to happen. I've dealt with it since I was 8 years old. I'm not doing it anymore. It's so tiring. Yeah, it is. So yeah.
Awesome. Oh, great. He sounds amazing. So good find.
Very good find.
Excellent. And let me think, other questions I have about your story. I guess, what is an ideal amount for you to pray? Do you have, like, if I didn't have OCD, this is what I would do around prayer?
I would love to just have one prayer in the morning after a shower and carry, quote unquote, God with me for the rest of the day, but also then to not be scared. I still carry fear around. I've gotten better. Like I would say after my experience with my friend, I was able to just, pray once a day. I think some days when I'm taking a break on myself, I don't pray at all, which is great. I think it's just that the constant sayings I was taught when I was young, which is God will punish you if you don't do, if you don't do well with your exams, we're going to be disappointed in you, etc. Like those are very difficult. I think that when you have that from when you're young, I don't think you can get rid of those messages that you've been taught very easily when you're older, especially if it goes on for your whole formative years. Ideally for me, it would just to be able to pray once a day and to not be scared. That's probably how I would like it. Yeah.
Okay, I'm sure you'll get there.
I hope so.
Yeah. So I guess, so you mentioned the diary, you mentioned working out, and obviously praying is the compulsion, but also a part of your value system and something that I'm sure helps as well, when you're doing it for obviously the right reasons and not compulsion. Is there anything else? Like, are you in therapy or medication or anything else currently?
Oh yeah. So this year was the first year that I started on antidepressants in my life, because I was just I was just in a bad way after I didn't pass my exam last year. Really, really bad. And so I started on fluoxetine. I would say I'm on 40 milligrams. I would say the only thing about fluoxetine, it hasn't helped with my compulsions, but it's helped to keep my mood just a nice normal level where I'm wake up I'm generally a very positive, like early morning bird person anyway, but it keeps me like that all the time now. And they do say that if your mood is better, you're able to tackle your compulsions better. So that definitely probably helped in the first 6 months, but obviously I think also because I was making even more of an active effort to get better with the OCD. So I wouldn't say that the antidepressants has helped in terms of compulsions, which I wish it could, but it hasn't. In terms of therapy, I've had my counsellor now, for since 2013-ish, and she's my regular counsellor that we meet once a week online. In terms of OCD, I occasionally meet with Katie, who I've mentioned before, and just try and join some OCD forum groups, but that's less and less frequent at the moment just due to work pressures. And so I think because I regularly listen to podcasts, and because at least I know what it is, like at least it's now, like when I was in my mid-20s, I had no idea what was going on with my brain. I had no idea why I was praying so much. I had no idea why I was getting so many sexually intrusive thoughts. Like, it was horrible. Whereas now I'm able to say, okay, is this a you thought or is this an OCD thought? Is this an OCD compulsion? Can you walk away from it? Okay, if you can't, do it once and then walk. So at least I'm now able to say, like, yeah, I recognize this is an OCD thought and compulsion.
Yeah, really good point. Okay, a nice one. And let me think. So was there a moment in your recovery journey where something just kind of clicked? Like, be that understanding OCD or how to get better from it, or just anything around that, like a light bulb moment.
I think there's been a couple, but it's still probably associated with what people have said. Anytime I speak to Sean, or watch some of his content online, he always says that this is an ego dystonic thought. And that's probably the biggest thing for me, because I'm like, yes, I absolutely hate all of these thoughts and images that I get. Great. It's actually not me. And therefore I shouldn't be punished, because God should also know that this is not me. So that's one phrase I think I definitely go back to. And I think it was, in terms of it, I wouldn't say it's more of a light bulb. As I said, I just got very tired in my early 30s. I was so tired of waking up every day and being in fear, and waking up praying a lot, feeling like I couldn't not pray. I still get that feeling that I can't not pray. Something that I've learned off Katie is having value-driven prayer. So praying, when you're thankful for something or you're grateful for something, not necessarily praying out of fear that something bad will happen. So it's probably ego dystonic thoughts and value-driven prayer. That's probably the best things that have helped me to keep going with my experiments and things and stopping my compulsions.
Yeah, no, I really like both of those. Value driven prayer, which I think is just maybe a good thing for people even without OCD who are religious. I'm sure there's many people that pray out of fear even though they don't have OCD.
Yeah.
And surely if I was God, I would want people to be more grateful than fearful of me.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm not God, so maybe that's why. So yeah, I like that. And maybe this is a personal question, so tell me to shut up if you don't want to answer it. But obviously with sexual based intrusive thoughts, for some people that can really interfere with their sex life. Yeah. So just any thoughts you had on that, if it bothers you in that area or has done or
it definitely has done before, in terms of you always feel like God is watching, which is not nice. It's quite scary. But I think one of the things I used to worry about, which I don't worry about as much anymore, is that I remember thinking, if I ever get married and I want children, how am I going to have sex and then go to a temple to pray or pray at home to pray for children? That's not the case anymore, but that was something I used to worry about, because I was just like, well, I think you go through those cycles of, well, sex is for recreation and procreation. I would want to pray to God to make sure I have a healthy pregnancy and I have a healthy child. So those thoughts used to worry me and bother me a lot in my 20s. Not so much now. And I think the funniest thing that I find with myself is how distinct I can be with work, because I'm a urologist, so I deal with kidneys, prostates, bladders, penises. I will help men get an erection. I will, I love that. I love andrology. And so it's interesting that my brain, I think maybe it's more, actually, this is my light bulb moment. It's more sexual assault, I think, affects me more than actual sex and intimacy. So thank you. That was really good. I can write about that.
That's okay.
But yeah, I think it's more because I'm helping people for the good to function, which is important for most people's lives. That's maybe why I don't think of it as a bad thing, or what I'm doing as a bad thing, because I know I'm coming at it with good intentions. So yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. So it's like the shadow or the dark side of sex that's the problem, not sex in and of itself.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay. And then was there like a roadblock, do you think, to get into where you are today? And if there was, kind of what was it?
Oh, the biggest thing which is why I wanted to speak to you today, is just it's so difficult to find anyone. Like I wish I had someone from the age of 12 to my mid 20s to be I think to be so isolated living in Wales. I think if I grew up in a community in London where all my family are, it might have been different, because I would have had all my cousins. I was just so alone. And when you're so alone with two big fearful things, which is an omnipresent being and always being told that sex is wrong, sex is bad, sex is wrong, then you just have no one to talk to. And I think as a result of not having anyone to talk to, and then also being very scared at home because of the nature of the environment at home, I just had no one. And that's something that I do speak to my parents about, now regularly a bit more, because I think my dad has definitely done some massive changes within himself, and he's really reflected on maybe how he's brought me up, and he's and I agree with him, he's not apologetic for kind of how he wanted to make sure that I studied, but he does wish that maybe he wasn't so harsh in other environments. And I think that's a mixture of us being able to talk more openly as adults. But I think the biggest roadblock is just not finding anyone either, and it wouldn't necessarily have to be of just the same ethnicity, but if I found someone in any religious community that says, hey, I have OCD, I worry about God punishing me all the time, that would have been a huge help. And I maybe would have started to, maybe would not have had the association of thoughts that, as in that thoughts are thoughts, as in don't latch onto a thought, don't latch on to, oh, you've had this image in a temple or in a church, like don't worry about it, we will get that. Like I wish someone had told me that, and maybe I would have been able to develop that sort of dismissive side of these thoughts if I could. So it was mainly those were the hardest things. And I think just like the internet has been wonderful in the last few years, because I've been able to find people who have similar stories, find people who have the forums, and you can just talk openly about how you're feeling and just not get judged. I think the biggest thing that I've been scared of because of what I describe is that I'm going to be judged of like, oh, you're a urologist, how can you have sexual thoughts? And my answer to that is, well, don't you have sexual thoughts if you're in a normal, intimate relationship and you're growing up and you want a family? But I think at least now from today, thank you, I have recognized it's more of the dark side, because I just get so upset, because I think maybe I see a lot of patients who do come in that you wonder why they've become addicted or come into hospital regularly with a certain problem. And for me, they've had some sort of abuse along the way, and they just can't find anyone to speak to about it. And I feel it makes me really sad that I think people go through that. And I just, I wish if it stopped, maybe the world would be a kind of better place, I think. Yeah.
Agreed. Okay. So, words of hope for anyone listening.
Reach out. If you hear someone who has a similar story to you, just reach out. There will be people willing to talk, because they know how isolating, how scary, how confusing, turbulent the whirlpool of thoughts in your brain can be. So reach out to anyone who has come forward, or even if they don't want to talk to you, they'll be like, I'm not the right person for you. But there's OCD forum groups, there's this OCD podcast. I think it's great that we have started expanding on because I don't think scrupulosity is spoken about that much. And I think people with scrupulosity, I'm still yet to find a person with scrupulosity with my same compulsions. So whenever I enter an OCD forum, I always ask people, so what are your compulsions? Some people just say it's repeating prayer, spending a long time praying, etc. I'm yet to find someone of my specific compulsions, but at least I have found people that have had scrupulosity. So I would say just reach out. I'm just so grateful that I've reached out to people and they've helped me. So yeah, and I'm here to help. If anyone wants to contact me, I'm here. So yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you. And then let me think about this next one. So what was an age of your life that was really tough for you? Like when you were younger, I should say.
I would definitely say, I think I realized, so the reason that I know when my OCD started was I was 8 years old and I left a towel on the banister, and that was the day my dad really lost his temper. So from that day onwards, I never left a towel on the banister. But then one day when I did, that was another time he blew up. So to me, that's where my OCD and my association began. And I think fourth year of university was my hardest. It was a very, very tough year at university in terms of all the subjects. Like, for example, I had a bad thought when I was locking the car and then got into a small car accident. But that then, because I had that thought and that image, that stuck with me for years and years of, you've had that thought, and therefore this happened. So that stuck with me for a really long time. So that made the compulsions a lot worse after that. So probably those 2 years. Yeah.
Okay. So let's take it when a second time you left the towel out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. You pick up the phone and call her in that moment of time. What would you tell her?
If I can call her now, I would say, I'm here. Be strong. Shield yourself is probably what I would say.
Okay.
And I think it's really hard for any child to do that when they're by themselves at home alone. I think it's very, very hard. I don't know where or how you can get away from that, really.
Yeah. Tough one. Yeah. Thank you for that. And then you've got a billboard. What do you want written on that billboard?
A thought is just a thought. I think if I could believe that as much as I try and say that to myself, and I don't know if other people who have OCD are able to take that sentence and believe it and then use it to help with their compulsions. I think it's interesting because I had something recently where I was thinking, oh, what if this person called me and told me that their daughter had died? And I just dismissed it immediately. And I was like, oh yeah, and that, that's not likely to happen. But it was interesting that I could dismiss that thought. Yeah, I can't dismiss other thoughts. And so on the billboard, it would definitely have to be a thought is just a thought. Let it go by, just let it go by. That would be what I would put on the billboard.
Yeah. Nice one. I like it. And then lastly, anything else you wish you could have said or shared today?
Am I going to say there's hope? OCD will only, I think, get better if you really stick to your experiments and really work hard at not giving into your compulsions. For me, that's definitely what has improved over time. The fact that I persisted with my experiments then every day, like walking into town now is a breeze. I'm concentrating on actually having a conversation with my partner or my mum. I'm not thinking about, oh my God, if I step on this side of the road, something bad will happen. If I, even sometimes at the gym, I'll break the routine and I'll say, no, I'm only going to do this many reps. So what is an odd number? So what it's this? So yeah, I think it's just, if you stick at it, it does get better. It is hard. It's an uphill battle. I'm definitely not out of the woods, especially when my anxiety gets high. But find people who support you. And once you've found them and they prove that they're trustworthy, reach out to them when you're in need or when you just want to talk, because they need you as much as you need them. And you get better because you finally, you learn little nuggets like the whack-a-mole, like OCD thoughts are ego dystonic. I only learned those from speaking to people with OCD, and that made a huge impact actually on how I, now look at any thought or compulsion that comes into my mind.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, good advice. Yeah. So look, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. I really appreciate it.
Very welcome. You're very welcome. Thank you for having me. I hope I can help anyone. That's all.
Thank you for listening to this week's podcast. And thank you to our Patreons who helped make this episode possible. And if you would like to find out more about Patreon and the rewards and benefits, then there will be a link in the episode description. If you enjoy the OCD Stories podcast and would like to support us with a one-time tip/donation, please go to theocdstories.com/support. All tips, no matter how large or small, are greatly appreciated. Please subscribe and rate the show wherever you listen to the podcast. And thank you to NoCD for supporting our work. And if you want to find out more about NoCD, head to go.treatmyocd.com/theOCD stories or click the link in the episode description. And quick disclaimer, guys, this podcast is not therapy. It is not a replacement for therapy. Please seek treatment from a trained professional. And until we speak, take care.